Section 14 of A Budget of Christmas Tales. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Christy Lufer. The Chimes by Charles Dickens. Third Quarter. When and how the darkness of the night-black steeple changed to shining light, and how the solitary tower was peopled with a myriad figures, when and how the whispered "Haunt and hunt him," breathing monotonously through his sleep or swoon, became a voice exclaiming in the waking ears of Trotty, "Break his slumbers." When and how he ceased to have a sluggish and confused idea that such things were, companioning a host of others that were not, there are no dates or means to tell. But, awake, and standing on his feet upon the boards where he had lately lain, he saw this goblin sight. Then, and not before, did Trotty see in every bell a bearded figure of the bulk and stature of the bell, incomprehensibly a figure and the bell itself, gigantic, grave, and darkly watchful of him as he stood rooted to the ground. Mysterious and awful figures, resting on nothing, poised in the night air of the tower with their draped and hooded heads merged in the dim roof, motionless and shadowy and dark, although he saw them by some light belonging to themselves. None else was there, each with its muffled hand upon its goblin mouth. He could not plunge down wildly through the opening in the floor, for all power of motion had deserted him. Otherwise he would have done so, aye, would have thrown himself head foremost from the steeple-top, rather than have seen them watching him, with eyes that would have waked and watched, although the pupils had been taken out. A blast of air, how cold and shrill, came moaning through the tower. As it died away, the great bell, or the goblin of the great bell, spoke. "What visitor is this?" it said. The voice was low and deep, and Trotty fancied that it sounded in the other figures as well. I thought my name was called by the chimes," said Trotty, raising his hands in an attitude of supplication. "I hardly know why I am here, or how I came. I have listened to the chimes these many years. They have cheered me often." "And you have thanked them?" said the bell. "1,000 times!" cried Trotty. "How?" I am a poor man," faltered Trotty, "and could only thank them in words." "And always so?" inquired the goblin of the bell. "Have you never done us wrong in words?" "No!" cried Trotty eagerly. "Never done us foul and false and wicked wrong in words?" pursued the goblin of the bell. Trotty was about to answer, "Never!" but he stopped and was confused. "The voice of time," said the phantom, "cries to man, advance. Time is for his advancement and improvement, for his greater worth, his greater happiness, his better life, his progress onward to that goal within its knowledge and its view, and set there in the period when time and he began. Ages of darkness, wickedness, and violence have come and gone. Millions uncountable have suffered, lived, and died to point the way before him. Who seeks to turn him back or stay him in his course arrests a mighty engine which will strike the meddler dead, and be the fiercer and the wilder ever for its momentary check." "I never did so to my knowledge, sir," said Trotty. "It was quite by accident if I did. I wouldn't go to do it, I'm sure." "Who puts into the mouth of time or of its servants," said the goblin of the bell, "a cry of lamentation for days which have had their trial and their failure, and have left deep traces of it which the blind may see. A cry that only serves to present time by showing men how much it needs their help when any ears can listen to regrets for such a past. Who does this does a wrong, and you have done that wrong to us, the Chimes." Trotty's first excess of fear was gone, but he had felt tenderly and gratefully toward the bells, as you have seen, and when he heard himself arraigned as one who had offended them so weightily, his heart was touched with penitence and grief. "If you knew," said Trotty, clasping his hands earnestly, "or perhaps you do know, if you know how often you have kept me company, how often you have cheered me up when I've been low, how you were quite the plaything of my little daughter Meg, almost the only one she ever had, when first her mother died and she and me were left alone, you won't bear malice for a hasty word." "Who hears in us, the Chimes, one note bespeaking disregard or stern regard of any hope or joy or pain or sorrow of the many sorrowed throng? Who hears us make response to any creed that gauges human passions and affections as it gauges the amount of miserable food on which humanity may pine and wither, does us wrong? That wrong you have done us," said the bell. "I have," said Trotty. "Oh, forgive me." "Spare me," cried Trotty, falling on his knees. "For mercy's sake." "Listen," said the shadow. "Listen," cried the other shadows. "Listen," said a clear and childlike voice, which Trotty thought he recognized as having heard before. The organ sounded faintly in the church below. Swelling by degrees, the melody ascended to the roof and filled the choir and nave. Expanding more and more, it rose up, 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 higher, higher up, awakening agitated hearts within the burly piles of oak, the hollow bells, the iron-bound doors, the stairs of solid stone, until the tower walls were insufficient to contain it, and it soared into the sky. No wonder that an old man's breast could not contain a sound so vast and mighty. It broke from that weak prison in a rush of tears, and Trotty put his hands before his face. "Listen," said the shadow. "Listen," said the other shadows. "Listen," said the child's voice. A solemn strain of blended voices rose into the tower. It was a very low and mournful strain, a dirge, and as he listened, Trotty heard his child among the singers. "She is dead!" exclaimed the old man. "Meg is dead! Her spirit calls to me! I hear it!" "The spirit of your child bewails the dead, and mingles with the dead. Dead hopes, dead fancies, dead imaginings of youth," returned the bell. "But she is living. Learn from her life a living truth. Learn from the creature dearest to your heart how bad the bad are born. See every bud and leaf plucked one by one from off the fairest stem, and know how bare and wretched it may be. Follow her to desperation." Each of the shadowy figures stretched its right arm forth and pointed downward. "The spirit of the Chimes is your companion," said the figure. "Go, it stands behind you." Trotty turned and saw the child, The child Will Fern had carried in the street, the child whom Meg had watched but now asleep. "I carried her myself tonight," said Trotty, "in these arms." "Show him what he calls himself," said the dark figures one and all. The tower opened at his feet. He looked down and beheld his own form lying at the bottom on the outside, crushed and motionless. "No more a living man!" cried Trotty. "Dead!" "Dead," said the figures all together. "Gracious heaven! And the new year!" "Past," said the figures. "What?" he cried, shuddering. "I missed my way, and coming on the outside of this tower in the dark, fell down a year ago." "9 years ago," replied the figures. As they gave the answer, they recalled their outstretched hands, and where their figures had been, there the bells were. "What are these?" he asked his guide. "If I am not mad, what are these?" "Spirits of the bells, their sound upon the air," returned the child. "They take such shapes and occupations as the hopes and thoughts of mortals, and the recollections they have stored up, give them." "And you?" cried Trotty wildly. "What are you?" "Hush, hush," returned the child. "Look here." In a poor, mean room, working at the same kind of embroidery which he had often, often seen before, Meg, his own dear daughter, was presented to his view. He made no effort to imprint kisses on her face. He did not strive to clasp her to his loving heart. He knew that such endearments were, for him, no more. But he held his trembling breath, and brushed away the blinding tears, that he might look upon her, that he might only see her. Ah, changed, changed! The light of the clear eye how dimmed! The bloom how faded from the cheek! Beautiful she was, as she had ever been, but hope, hope, hope! Oh, where was the fresh hope that had spoken to him like a voice? She looked up from her work at a companion. Following her eyes, the old man started back. In the woman grown, he recognized her at a glance. In the long silken hair, he saw the self-same curls. Around the lips, the child's expression lingering still. See, in the eyes now turned inquiringly on Meg, there shone the very look that scanned those features when he brought her home. Then, what was this beside him? Looking with awe into its face, he saw a something reigning there, a lofty something, undefined and indistinct, which made it hardly more than a remembrance of that child, as yonder figure might be. Yet it was the same, and wore the dress. Hark! They were speaking. "Meg," said Lilian, hesitating, "how often you raise your head from your work to look at me?" "Are my looks so altered that they frighten you?" asked Meg. "Nay, dear, but you smile at that yourself. Why not smile when you look at me, Meg?" "I do so, do I not?" she answered, smiling on her. "Now you do," said Lilian, "but not usually. When you think I'm busy, and don't see you, you look so anxious and so doubtful that I hardly like to raise my eyes. There is little cause for smiling in this hard and toilsome life, but you were once so cheerful." "Am I not now?" cried Meg, speaking in a tone of strange alarm, and rising to embrace her. "Do I make our weary life more weary to you, Lilian?" "You have been the only thing that made it life," said Lilian, fervently kissing her. "Sometimes the only thing that made me care to live so, Meg. Such work, So many hours, so many days, so many long, long nights of hopeless, cheerless, never-ending work. Not to heap up riches, not to live grandly and gaily, not to live upon enough, however coarse, but to earn bare bread, to scrape together just enough to toil upon, and want upon, and keep alive in us the consciousness of our odd fate. Oh, Meg, Meg!" She raised her voice and twined her arms about her as she spoke, like one in pain. "How can the cruel world go round and bear to look upon such lives?" "Lily," said Meg, soothing her and putting back her hair from her wet face. "Why, Lily, you, so pretty and so young—" "Oh, Meg," she interrupted, holding her at arm's length and looking her in the face imploringly. "The worst of all, the worst of all! Strike me hope, Meg, wither me and shrivel me and free me from the dreadful thoughts that tempt me in my youth." Trotty turned to look upon his guide, but the spirit of the child had taken flight, was gone. End of section 14, third quarter of the Chimes.